Alrighty. So I'm on a little bit early for tonight's 7 o'clock Inspired to Lead session on intentionality. So I'm going to give everybody some time. We're going to start at the top of the hour. We got about 4 minutes. And I think that we're just going to hang out until then. So as you hop on, if you want to say hi, you want to go ahead and share this, that would be great. And then we can get started here at the top of the hour. We're going to be doing Intentionality, Session 3 of the Inspired to Lead focus group. And I'm excited to get started. So I'm just kind of hanging out for a minute. I'll probably play a little bit of music. If you're hopping on, say hello, let me know you're here, and hit the share button. We want to get this out to all of our circles. Yes. So I'm going to have some music on. So. All right. So we got a couple more minutes. We're going to be starting session 3 of Inspired to Lead focus group, Intentionality. So hang tight as you're hopping on. Say hello. Hey, Pastor Dexter, welcome, my friend. So in about 2 minutes, we're going to get started on an amazing opportunity that I think that you will love to see, Pastor Dexter. It's actually coming off the book, and I can't wait to get started here. We're going to kick off here in just a minute. If you can share this, if you can share this, that would be great, because we want to get as many people involved as we possibly can. So say hello, let me know you're here. I know there's a bit of a delay, so I'll try to take care of that. Let me go ahead and stop this. I talk about getting inspired, right? So before we get started, as you guys start hopping on, you know, The Greatest Showman is a great movie, not just in and of itself, what a great movie, but the soundtrack, just, man, it gets me fired up, gets me truly inspired, not even to lead, but maybe sometimes just to do jumping jacks or something. So, all right. So we got about a minute away from starting. If you're hopping on, and we'll go ahead and get started right at the top of the hour. I like to kind of respect the time and everything like that. So as people kind of hop on, they can always go back and catch up later. It's no big deal. But I just want to thank you for hopping on, saying hello. Let me know you're here. Waves, send a like, do something. Just let me know you're here. And hit the share button again. We're about to get started. It is now 7 o'clock. So we are going to kick this thing off, whether ready or not. Here we come. Pastor Dexter, you might have some stuff to input into this. So basically what this is, guys, this is session 3 of the Inspired to Lead focus group. Thank you so much for being here. If you guys have been following it here on the BMW OC page, we've already had Leroy and Denisha do an amazing job of bringing the topics of leadership and identity. Now today I'm bringing intentionality, and for me, when I do these conferences and when I think about how this all goes together, Pastor Dexter, tell me if you agree or not, because Pastor Dexter is one of our speakers. I believe intentionality is kind of the glue that brings it all together. If you take all the topics of this focus group, you realize that none of them actually really work without intentional action. And so that's what we are going to talk about today. And as we get started, I want to let you guys know this is actually kind of derived right out of a book I wrote called Inspired to Lead. And the focus group is based right off of that and our He Leads Men's Professional Leadership Conference, which you can kind of see right here. We are preparing for the next one in Arkansas, and it is going to be a blast. So without further ado, if you guys are hopping on again, say hello. We're going to get kicked off. I've got my whiteboard back here. I'm probably going to do some drawing and doing some things, so I'm definitely excited. And again, I know there's a delay. I'll try to catch you guys as you ask questions. Don't hesitate. The way that this format goes is going to be about 30 minutes of me just kind of maybe teaching, answering questions on the fly if they come, and then the back end will be kind of a Q&A session where if you have some questions or you want to dig a little bit deeper, there's some things you want to touch on a little bit more, we'll have time at the back end. I'll stay on as long as I need to. Okay, Pastor Dexter, being intentional is where it starts. Absolutely. And great that you brought that up. So since we're talking about where we start, anytime that we're talking about anything in life, it doesn't matter if it's personal or professional or relational, it doesn't matter. All we have to know is that there's a starting point. We start somewhere, right? And we got to look ahead and say, well, where are we going to end up? What's that end point, right? We can even call this point A and point B, right? So how many of us use the Google Maps app? You know, when we want to go somewhere, you know, for us here in Baltimore, maybe we want to go down, you know, to DC or maybe West Virginia and go check out Harper's Ferry or something. But what we do is we put an address in our Google Maps, right? And it comes up with 3 different options. And what option do we normally choose? You know, normally we're looking for that most direct and fastest route, right? So why in our lives do we not do the same thing? Why in our lives, when we have a goal, whatever it is, you know, call it a dream, call it a goal, call it a vision, right? Call it whatever you want. Why do we not do like Google Maps and pick the most direct and fastest route? We don't. Most people, if I say, okay, here's your dream, here's your vision, how are you going to get there? Most people have no idea. They think they might go this way. They might go out here and come this way. They might circle around about 30 times and never really get off their starting point, right? Why is that? Because nobody really picks that direct route. And when you pick that direct route, that act in and of itself is intentional. And when you decide, I'm going to take that direct and intentional route, you have to take intentional action to go that way. So think about the Google Maps. You pick that, right? You pick whatever route you choose. The next step is what? Take a left on so-and-so road. Take a right on so-and-so road. Go 3 miles, right? You have to then put your car in drive. It's an intentional act. Push the gas pedal and go. It's the same thing with our goals. It's the same thing with, you know, whatever it is that we want to do in this life. We've got to select the path and then take intentional action, put ourselves in drive, and push the gas. Amen. I mean, does that make sense to you guys? I mean, that is like the down and dirty within 3 minutes of a 30-minute teaching what intentional action is all about, being intentional. So what does that even mean? You know, Leroy did an amazing job of breaking down kind of the whole concept of leadership. And then Denisha really tied in, like, who are we? Like, what perspective are we coming from? What does it look like, you know, from all these different angles of what our identity is as a leader. So now I'm going to tie that in, and then this is going to lead right into the next 2 sessions with Michael and Connie, where we're talking about connection and we're talking about accountability and service. All those things take intentionality. And so what does that look like? So I'm trying to catch on. Hey, Leroy, thanks for hopping on. We must be strategic and intentional if we are to reach our assignment, our finish point. Amen. And the quickest way to anything is generally the straightest line, right? You know, as the crow flies. But how many of us would agree that we've caught ourselves in this circle? We've caught ourselves in a, you know, the whirlpool, if you will. It's kind of sucking us in to the same situation, same circumstances. You know, nothing's really changing. We think we start to see something, and we circle right back to where we were. You know, that's because I think that we don't have a definite plan of purpose. And like Leroy just said, we're not strategic in how we're going to get to this point in the most effective and efficient way, and that takes intentional action. Amen. So I'm in the middle of a study, and this book is amazing. I wanted to share something with you guys out of this book. It is Think and Grow Rich from Napoleon Hill. If you have not read this book, or even if you have, I would suggest reading it again, because it is absolutely amazing. And there's a quote in here, and I want to make sure I get to it. That's in the chapter on persistence. And persistence is so key to a lot of what we do, especially as small business owners. If any of us out there are that, you know as well as I do, that without persistence, without that focus, and without that intentional action, what it is that we're trying to do never really takes hold, right? It kind of falls flat. And so one thing that Napoleon says in here in the persistence chapter is about criticism, and how we can allow criticism to kind of derail us, right? And at the end of that part, he says here that he discovered that most ideas are stillborn and need the breath of life injected into them through, and this is the part that hits me, the breath of life is injected through definite plans of immediate action. So definite plans would be very intentional. You've got to strategize, as Leroy said, create that definite plan, and then take a massive immediate action. And that crushes any criticism, any doubt, any fear, because you then give life to that idea, that thought, whatever. You give it life through deliberate planning and action. So I love that. I thought that keyed really well into what I wanted to go over today with you guys about being intentional. So this is just a very basic idea of just generally, you can apply this to every part of your life, right? But what about, let me try to erase this. So how does intentionality fit into our personal lives? I mean, I know that this whole idea of Inspired to Lead, a lot of people would probably think it only has to deal with our professional lives. But how many of us here would agree that everything we do professionally affects us personally, and everything we do personally affects us professionally? If we are able to intentionally do things in our personal life, how is that going to translate into professional life? And while there may have been a time back in the day where you could separate the two and it was actually kind of encouraged, I think today in the markets that we see, in the society that we live in, there isn't that fine line anymore. Things are blurred. It's a crossover. Things become well known, and people are very aware of what's going on around them. So how do we translate the way that we're living in any facet of our life into intentional action that then impacts every facet of our life? Okay, so look at what you're doing right now. You probably in your mind have an idea of certain goals, certain ideas, certain things that you have planned. Okay, if you guys saw the video I did about the 12-week year, where you kind of have an idea of what you're looking at, what your next steps are, things like that, and then when things start falling off, what happens, right? So in our, I'm just going to start off with our personal life. So in our personal life, let's look at, if you're married, what did you have to do in order to pursue your significant other? What did you have to do to encourage them to want to spend time with you? What did you have to do to get them to say yes to that commitment of marriage? What did you have to do up until the day that you said I do to ensure that everything was in order, right? And I think Leroy hit it right on the head, especially as guys. We're very strategic. We court our ladies. We go out and we do things for them. We show up with flowers. We're planning things. We're doing all these things, and it's taking intentionality. It's taking energy, right? And then what happens is we get married, and a year or 2 years down the road, things start kind of faltering a bit. And why is that? And I think the key is that we give up on intentional action and we fall into the zone of comfort. And I think that it's just going to kind of ride, that all of our intentional action initially is going to carry us through for what, 30, 40, 50, 60 years, whatever it may be. And the problem with intentional action is it is not a one and done idea. Intentional action is a constant thing. It takes energy, it takes time, it takes a decision and a choice to move forward in whatever direction it is that you need to go. I'm using a marriage because it's a very simple parallel. But think about your business. If you have a business, right, and things started off like on fire and you've had great ideas and you were just boom, you were taking action here, boom, and then you just hit like a wall and you're not sure what's going on, I would look at that idea, the same concept, the same parallel, and say, is there something that I've kind of just backed off of? Am I not being persistent, as Napoleon Hill would say, in getting through? Am I not looking ahead and taking intentional action past where I am? So just because we go from point A to B, absolutely we celebrate that, but we've got to be intentional about continuing even beyond that. Just because we get from A to B doesn't mean we're done. And I believe that everybody in this group, everybody that's watching this, believes that they aren't done at point B. I believe most people in this group aren't going to be satisfied until they die, because we are all growth people. We are all learners. We're lifelong developing people. And that only happens through intentional action. That doesn't mean you don't celebrate this moment and say, hey, I got to B, and you take time to celebrate that. But you've already got to be strategizing into the next level and coming up with your action plan to take you up to that level, and how you're going to take step 1, step 2, step 3, and then the next most important step, to act with intention on that strategy, on that how-to that you created. Amen? Does that make sense? Does that make sense for you guys? So when we're talking about intentionality, you realize that whether you're leading or following, whether you are developing or networking, whether you're successful or you're just starting off, it doesn't matter. Everything is done with an intentional choice and then an intentional act behind that, whether it be good or bad. You take intentional action even in a negative sense. And truth be told, our natural tendency is to go the negative. We have to be very, very conscious of making the positive intentional choice. We can be very intentional in not even being intentional. Does that make sense? So what does that mean? I need to get a bigger eraser. So what that means is, in order to make a decision and go a direction, you've got to be intentional in how you're thinking. You got to be intentional in coming up with that plan, with envisioning, that final destination. You've got to be intentional in all those moments. But unless you take intentional action, you're intentionally choosing to not ever reach that end point, right? That to never reach that destination, to never reach what we would call the arrival point. I believe Napoleon Hill calls it. So we will never depart where we truly are unless we act. There's a lot of intentionality in our lives, and I know the title of this was Intentionality, and I want to make sure that we understand that I'm pushing it from beyond intentionality into actually taking action, because if we're intentional in our thought, we're intentional in the direction, we're intentional in a lot of different things, but we never act on it, you're really never going to reach the full potential that you have within you. There's a lot of great ideas out there. There's a lot of amazing people out there. There's a lot of just good stuff that we're missing out on because somebody's not choosing to act on it right now. And why not? Why do we not take intentional action? What are some of the reasons? I mean, if you guys can throw some down, that'd be great. So what are the reasons why we don't take intentional action. Maybe it's fear. Maybe it's doubt. Maybe it's just not believing you have the talent, not believing you're prepared enough. There's numbers and numbers and numbers of reasons why we might not take intentional action. But I would say that it still takes intention to allow any of this to cut you off from that dream or cut you off from that goal. So my challenge for you guys throughout this whole thing, in this whole intentionality process, my challenge is to start being conscious of those moments that you know you should act or you could act or anything like that, and you stop yourself. Be conscious of that moment, because that is the moment where you taking intentional action toward your goal is going to wreck everything that's trying to intentionally hold you back from that goal. So intentionality, the topic in and of itself, isn't necessarily good or bad. It's a word just like anything else. And just like any word, it is the action behind the word that gives the word weight. Right? Let's think about communication, which I know Michael's going to talk about. But one of the stats I love about communication is on a scale of 0 to 100%, our words account for only 7% of how we communicate. 93% is in body language and in tone. Most of it body language, 65% in body language. That's huge. That is your actions speaking louder than words. That is intentionality. Are you intentional in how you present yourself, and in what body language you're giving and showing, and what tonality you're bringing into a conversation or a situation or a circumstance? That ultimately will give that 7% of the words that communicate and have power more weight. So if your actions back up your words, right, then your words have more weight. People will trust what you say initially, especially if they don't really have too much else to go on. But it's going to take your intentional actions that'll back that up, that'll support what you're saying, and people will start, believing you. You'll start gaining that credibility and that trust, right? So, think about this in your businesses or in your life, right? Relationships. If we tie that back, how many relationships fell flat because maybe your actions didn't match up with your words. Remember, action speaks louder than words. Intentional action, massive, immediate, intentional action in the direction of where you're going is going to absolutely change everything. The perspective, the result, who comes around you, the magnetism that comes from you being focused in on your purpose and taking, no prisoners, if you will. You're just running that direction. Gives you the opportunity to say no to a lot of those distractions and a lot of those things that aren't going to matter. Intentional action is very focused, and it's very, very powerful. So let's take a look. One more thing. I think that I'm coming up close here, so I'm going to cut myself off here in about 5 minutes. And I want to show you one more thing that kind of makes sense. A lot of people, are busy and they take a lot of action, right? I think I might have shown this on a video if you've been watching me on Team CNE. But when I started out, after resigning from the sheriff's office, and I started kind of into this process, I was doing a lot of things. I was all over the place, right? Doing good stuff. I was very active, very busy. And while maybe some of these, I was having a little bit more success and having an impact than others, ultimately none of these were where I was going. None of this was the path, the direction, my purpose. They were all good things. I had a heart for some of these things, but it really wasn't lined up with what I was supposed to do. And so once I figured out what it was I was supposed to do, I now had a new starting point, and I have a new ending point. saying, I want to start a business. I want to help people to grow and to recognize their potential, and not even recognize their potential, but then tap into that unlimited potential. And I want to partner with them and help them create the strategy and the steps to get to that. And then I want to hold them accountable on taking intentional action, right? And so I realized, like, man, I've got to live this before I can ever teach it or have credibility in this environment, right? If I didn't do it, or I'm not doing it, who's gonna take me seriously? So I had to recognize that. And that whole thing that Pastor Dexter said, that whole straight line, point A to point B, I had to realize that I had to go that way, and I had to do it with everything I had. And what I realized was this: as I did that, all the things that I needed to let go of, right, in order to focus, because you're gonna have to give up something to go somewhere. You're gonna have to sacrifice some things in order to reach that destination. If you're taking a focused, intentional action in that specific direction, that means some things are going to have to kind of be let go. It doesn't mean that you get them out of your life necessarily, unless you need that, but it means that that isn't your priority right now. That isn't your focus. That is. And so what does that mean? Does that mean that you just lose that opportunity? Maybe, maybe not. It may be for you, it may not be for you. But here's one thing I've recognized as I start going this direction, and I start doing it with more intentionality and more focus. Focus is power. So all these things that are out here, right, that I could go these directions, they're good, but they're not the best thing for me. But when I put my full power and energy into that, imagine a train going by. You're standing on a track, and a train goes by you at the speed that they go, right? 50 miles an hour. What happens, right? You get pulled into that train. That's why they tell you, don't stand close to the edge, because you're going to get sucked in, and that's not a good thing, right? What about when you're driving on the interstate, and a truck passes you, or you pass a truck? You feel that that air around it that's being pulled into that massive object. Same thing as diving into a pool or into a lake or something. When you dive in, what happens? Right? You watch them dive in. What comes up behind them? All the water comes up and then follows them in. Right? It's the pull. So what I'm saying is, you let go of this stuff initially, but when you have such powerful direction and focus, these things, the things that are going to support your mission, if you will, are going to come around. Just like the water, just like the air, when a train passes you, it's going to come around, and it's going to come into your lane and end up being there in a support role for you to reach that point even faster, right? Or even launch you into the next point. You didn't even have to focus on it. It's just going to naturally come. It's what in John Maxwell we say is the law, of magnetism. Right? You attract those things. And then the law of momentum is kind of a part of that as well, where you're just going. And people get attracted to that because you know where you want. Leaders are going to need to become clear in order to gain any kind of followership. And you've got to be intentional about your vision. You've got to be intentional about what it is you want. Be clear about it. Because one thing that I think Leroy, I can't remember if you even mentioned this or not, but as a leader, people are not going to follow you just because you have leadership skills per se. They're not going to follow you because you're trustworthy and you come up with good ideas every once in a while, or you know how to empower people. Like, that's all great. I mean, those are good qualities to have. But ultimately, people are going to follow people with clarity, and you have to take intentional action in order to be clear, and that is powerful stuff. And I just kind of want to finish off with the whole clarity idea, because I think it's just really impactful, especially when it comes to being intentional and where you want to go. So you can't be intentional and take that action in that direction if you have no idea where you're going. So the first step is figuring out what your purpose is. Why are you here? What are you doing? And when you know that, when you get that, when you have that clarity, and then you put everything you have, focused energy, into intentional action in that direction, there's nothing that's going to stop you. That's persistence through every obstacle that you can get. all through taking intentional action. It builds you up, it supports you, it brings the right people around you, and it just makes it happen. Amen. Awesome. So we are at 30 minutes. I didn't want to go much more, so let me see here. So Anne said, being intentional, taking action is what's needed. Absolutely. Daily intentionality is critical. Like you said, it requires action. Sometimes we have to give up to go up. Give up so old ways that distract us from our purpose. Yeah, I mean, and sometimes you got to realize, I know I've talked about circles before, and when we're intentional about who we surround ourselves with, and this is a key, who we actually surround. So not only what circles are we, do we have around us, but what circles are we in? You've got to be very intentional about who it is that you're around, what it is you're listening to, what it is you're watching. All those things are going to impact your end point, as Leroy said, that destination, that arrival point that you're trying to get to. And as a coach, one of the things I've heard a lot of people say is, well, in 3 years, I think, or 4 years, I think I can get to this, blah, 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 right? And I challenge them because I said, well, what are you holding on to right now that is not lining up with where you want to be? And you've got to be intentional about letting those things that are compromising that go, so that you can be 100% focused to take intentional action in that direction. So again, intentionality is everything. Everything we do is done with intention, whether it's I didn't do it intentionally or I did do it intentionally. But the same point is there. Your actions speak louder than words, and that is a negative or positive, but it all depends on you, what strategy you came up with, like Leroy said earlier, and what steps you put in place, and what intentional action you've done in whatever direction you've chosen. Does that make sense? Our network circles have to be aligned. Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And too many times I see these people that look at addictions. People come out of addiction, and one of the reasons why they fall back into it is they go right back to the same people because that's what they know. We're not surrounding people with uplifting, encouraging, empowering, challenging people that are going to bring them to the next level and not allow them to fall back into that. We just kind of let them go to their own devices, and their own devices are going to take them right back to where they are. We have to be, and here's another thing, intentional about who we're mentoring and who's mentoring us. So our circles are huge. Amen. Thank you, Ann. So hopefully this has made some sense. Hopefully, I was able to help you out a little bit, or give you, a little clarity on intentionality. One of my favorite things to talk about with people is the whole intentional action, right? And so today, just actually at a meeting, we talked about getting from, the seat that we were at out into the hallway to the secretary's desk, right? And we said, okay, so if I told you to do that, how would you do that? And for people that are in this environment, they know, like Pastor Dexter said, straight line, A to B. But there's too many people out there with their Google map who don't necessarily pick the easiest way. And that's an intentional act one way or the other. You got to decide where you want to be. You got to decide when you want to be there. You got to decide how to get there, and then you got to take action. That's intentionality in a nutshell. Actions reveal your connections, and connections determine our direction. Wow, Pastor Dexter, that's good. That's why you're speaking my conference there, because that's good. Actions reveal your connections, and connections determine our direction. Wow, that was great, Pastor Dexter. Amazing. You got it, man. I can't wait to get back with you and get this conference going, because this is the stuff that it's all about. And you, my friend, are a great person to have in my circle. So thank you. Along with Ann and Leroy and everybody in this group, you guys are a circle that is empowering and strengthening. And more people need to get involved and active in order to build each other up and to make not just the group, but each other just continually better. We are in the business of learning, always developing, always growing, always. Because the minute you stop, you might as well just die, because there's no point at that point. There's no point at that point. Double point there, right? But as long as we stay intentional and we take action on those intentions, not just have good intentions, but take action on those intentions, you're going to start seeing positive results, major impact, and a return on the investment of that time and energy like you never thought possible. Amen. We do have an awesome team. Team C&E all the way, our core four, absolutely. And I just love that I was able to introduce Inspired to Lead to this group. And we've had amazing people jump on and facilitate this. Again, Inspired to Lead, we got 2 more weeks. I will actually be out of town. My wife and I are going out for our anniversary, but I'm going to bring my computer, see if I can try to at least follow. Next week is Michael Labler. He's going to do Connection. And then the next week to finish us off is going to be Connie, who's doing mentorship or mentoring and service. And I know, Pastor Dexter, that's one of your favorite topics, service. So, definitely, if you want, Pastor Dexter, join the BMWOC group. Maybe I'll invite you, and then that way you can log on and listen to that one too if you want. So I'm going to go ahead and get out of here. I'll wait about 2 minutes if there's any questions or anything like that live. If not, then I'll answer them as they pop up throughout the week as people watch this. So I appreciate you guys coming on. Thank you so much for hanging out, for putting up with my my art or in art ability. And you guys go out and figure out what it is what direction you're going, what are some of those goals you have, and what intentional action can you take today in the direction of those goals. And I'd love to hear how that plays out for you. Awesome. So I'm going to hang out for about a minute. You guys have an awesome night. Sign off if you need to. Ask a question if you need to. And let's see. I'll go till the 37-minute mark or so, and then I'll sign off. So thank you, Ann. Appreciate it. Happy anniversary. Oh, thank you, guys. Happy anniversary. Happy anniversary. Thank you, Ann. Thank you, Dexter. And thank you for allowing me to set this up and bring this to the group. I really pray that this really impacts them in a great way. I just trying to figure out ways to add value, and I just really pray that this was a good opportunity for them. Hey, Alicia, happy anniversary. Yeah, please watch it all. I rambled on about some stuff for about 30 minutes, so there might be 1 or 2 things in there worthwhile. Awesome. Thank you, guys. Thank you. So we are about 10 seconds, and then I will go ahead and end the video. Thank you guys for coming on and spending time with me tonight. Have an amazing rest of the week. God bless.